Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Nun Vav 56 in Baba Basra. We learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanusun Vatzar V'Shivya. We're on the sixth line. There's no two dots there. The word Ein Sham. And here we have machlokas right away between the Rashbam and Tosfos. What are we talking about? Mishnah. Yesterday's morning we talked about that boundaries or the chatzav plant. It's probably like a bush that Yoshua demarcated the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael and the various Shvatim, etc. That was a plant that he used, and we said that if you have a boundary or that kind of a plant used as a boundary, that is sufficient. It's not only sufficient, but it also it limits you. That if, let's say, you are acquiring the nechassim of a ger who died without any heirs, and it's free for you to take, it's like hefker. And let's say there were two fields there, and they were separated by a boundary or by these bushes, and you made a kinyan on one field, you're not going to the other one, because those bushes or boundaries serve as a separation between the two. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said, and everybody agreed that he said that. Rabbi Yochanan said on 3 lines from the bottom of Nun Hey Bar Aleph, what about for Peah and for Tumah? Right? Do those boundaries make a special separation that if you have two fields separated by this bush or one field separated by these bushes so that it's like two fields, are you required to bring Peah on both fields or only on one? So that we said as a machlokas. According to Rav Asher, Rabbi Yochanan, for Peah and for Tumah, it doesn't serve as a separation, it's one. And for Tumah, the question was if you went into a stretch of fields and they were separated by a bush, like by these kind of bushes, and you knew there was a dead body in one of the fields, but you don't know if you went in there or not. Rabbi Lazar said that you're tar. Why? Because it's a spek vacant. Number one, you're not sure if you went into that field, and even if you went into the field, maybe you didn't go, maybe you didn't touch you were not mile, or you didn't touch the dead body. So it's a spek vacant because it's several fields. According to Chum, is one big field. It's not a separation. Therefore, it's only one suffix. And suffix Tomer b'shus yachid. Why is it b'shus yachid? Because in the wintertime, people don't travel there, don't walk over the field because it's plants, etc. So since it's a suffix b'shus yachid, you're tummy. So we had a machlokas about that. Now the Gemara says, Ein sham lo mitzvah. Let's say there was no boundary and there's no bush tree on the Vav Amud Aleph. There's nothing there. Then what? What are we speaking about? Are we speaking about the case of the Nechsei Ger? That's how Rashbam learns. Rashbam says we're talking about there. What's the halacha? Yeah, but we already discussed that back 2 days ago. Rav and Shmuel were talking about that. Rav and Shmuel said that if you have a field that's clearly demarcated, what kind of a kinyan do you have to make? Is it enough to stick one shovel in or not? Rav said as soon as you put one shovel in, you acquire the whole thing. Shmuel says no, you only acquire that shovel space itself. And then the Gemara said, let's say it doesn't have boundaries. What do you have to do? And Rashbam said that's only according to Rav. According to Shmuel, certainly you're not Kona. Even according to Shmuel, even if you had a clearly demarcated field and you stuck a shovel in, all you got was that shovelful. You didn't acquire the whole field. The question was only according to Rav. What do you get? So he said, well, if you plowed 2 furrows up and down across the whole field, you acquire it then. That's how one way to learn one shot in the Rashbam was you acquired the whole field that way. Okay, so according to Rashbam, we're asking the same kasha now here. Ein sham lo mitzvah of my. What do you have to do to be koned? So Rashbam says, Pirush Rabbinus Mishmo. Rav Meir explained it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Name Rabbi Yochanan, Kol shenikra sal shmo. You know what? What's considered the field? How much are you kona? You're kona as long as it's called this field, like Yankel's field. How do you explain that? Or a puppet, the correlate bega gusa the plenty. It's known as the field irrigated by Yankel with his bore, with his pit of water. It's known that way. According to Rashbam, though, it's very difficult to say this. Rashbam shot is very difficult because number one, Rashbam says the kassa's on Rav and Shmuel before. Rav and Shmuel certainly kassa's on Shmuel. Shmuel said that even if you had a demarcated field, clearly defined field, and you stuck a shovel in, you only got the shovel's worth. You didn't cover the whole thing. So how did Rav say over here, Rav and Shmuel, Amr La'el, could also tie? That wasn't Rav and Shmuel. Rashbam himself said that Rav explained that, not Shmuel. Difficult to understand the Rashbam here. And the 6th line in the wide lines in Rashbam, or the 5th line, is the Ilu. Rabbi Shmuel, Amr Leil, could also Turi. Well, that's only according to Rav, not according to Shmuel. So maybe the word Shmuel over here is added on. It's not really Rav. But in any case, why is it a kasha b'chlal? We already explained the shita before. before that if you go up and down. So he said because he heard another shita. He says over here, why did he ask the kasha again? Rashbam here in the wide lines says, the second of the wide lines in the Gemara in Rashbam. The main sham lo mates v'chotz of the Edim Muslim Mali. Mali, what did Yochanan say? Kamasor chlach shikneko. We already explained Rav and Shmuel's shita. They said before it's really Rav as long as the thing goes up and down. So why does he ask the kash again now? Because he heard that another shita in Rabbi Yochanan. It's Rav Meir said Rabbi Yochanan. No, that it's as long what do you acquire? It's not even so much how much you have to do. We already explained that Rashbam said before two pshatim in Kira Azal Tire, the Shuri back on Nun Dalet Amid Beis. One shot is how far do you have to go, or how much do you acquire? So here he says, here it's more to say this: if the kasha is a similar kasha, it's how much do you acquire if it's undefined. So before he said you acquire like 2 furrows up and down. Now he's saying how much you acquire. You acquire the entire field as long as it's called Yankel's field. Yankel's field is what you acquire if there's no demarcation there. Tosas learns the whole thing differently. Tosas, the second Tosas says, we're not talking about if you acquire the chasim of a ger and there's no demarcation there, how much do you acquire? 2 furrows we had before. Now he's saying you acquire the entire field that is called by his name. The kasha's on Tumah. The question we said yesterday that when you have a dead body buried in a field somewhere, and now you come on a stretch of fields, you're not sure if you went in that field, the particular field that had the dead body or not. Rabbi Lezer said it's Torah because it's a spek sveka. According to Rabban, it's one big field. There is no separation. The bushes, the chatzah bush doesn't make a separation. It's one suffix. Suffix comes from shiyachid. You're tamei. According to Rabbi Lezer, it's 2 svekas. Why? It's a suffix since the bushes mark a demarcation line between the different fields in this area, this whole plain stretch of fields. So it's a spek sveka. Number one, did I go into the right field that had the dead body? And number two, even if I went into the field with the dead body, maybe I didn't touch the dead body, or I didn't tent over it. I didn't spread myself over the tent, so I didn't become tamei. So Tosa says, the second Tosa is here on the page. You went into a valley, into a stretch of fields. The tumah beside a plain, there was a tum one. Almost there, Belazer, Arei Shal Shasiachid, Pirush Rabranis Mishmo. Rabranis explained the name of Belazer. Koshesh Lashem B'fnei Atzma. Below Pirush, according to Pirush, will become Rabranis Hanim Mishim Rabbi. Rather, the question is, if there's no demarcation there, are you tamei or not? So what's considered a separate field if it's called by that name? In other words, if you went into a field, it's a stretch of fields, and you're not sure if you went into this field, which field? How are they demarcated? Because they have different names. This is Yankels, this is Shmerels, this is Barrels. That's what we're talking about. Then that's considered a field if there's no demarcation line. So you might go into a stretch of fields according to the pshat we had yesterday. If these fields are separated by these chatzah bushes or some boundary, that makes them separate. That makes a spek sveka. According to Rav Meir, he's explaining the name of Blazer. No, what makes a separate field? Even if there's no clear physical demarcation, no bushes, but if it's called by a different name, that's Yankel's field, that's Barrel's field, that's Shmerel's field. Amra Papa. Yosef Ravacha, back in the Gemara, about 9 lines down on the page. Yosef Racha Bar Avi Kamei Ravasi. Yosef Kamei was sitting and said in front of Ravasi like this. Ravacha Bar Avi was sitting in front of Ravasi. Yosef Kamei Mishmeid Ravasi. He said the name of Ravasi Rab Chanina. In other words, right, he was Ravasi. He was sitting in front of Ravasi, and he quoted, and Ravacha Barabi was quoting something named Ravasi Bar Chanina, a different Ravasi. Chatzuba Mafsik B'nechsei Ger. Basically the same halacha we had yesterday in the case of, like Rabbi Yochanan said, that the Chatzuba plant separates in Nechsei Ger. So if a ger left, let's say 2 fields, he died with no Yorshim, and those fields are now hefker, and you can acquire them. If you acquire one, do you acquire the other? Well, if there's a chatzah, if there's a bush separating the 2 fields, you only acquire the one that you made a chazak on. Now, after all explaining this, he says, what is the chatzuba? What is this plant? Shabo tichim Yoshua li Yisrael as ours. Yoshua marked the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael with this bush tree. As we explained, why? Because this tree, this bush, its roots go only straight down. It doesn't steal from the sides. So this is a good lesson for Bnei Israel not to steal. And this is how he demarcated all the various boundaries of Eretz Israel, and even among the Shvatim, between the various Shvatim. That's why it's called. This is the Chatzuva plant that we're talking about. In Yoshua and Sefer Yoshua, he lists all the cities that he demarcated, but he said he doesn't list every single city in Eretz Israel. He only listed the cities that stand on the boundaries. The boundaries, to show the boundary would also limit you between Shevet and Shevet, and between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz in terms of Meiser. In terms of Meiser, are only chayiv in Eretz Yisrael, not in Chutz La'aretz. I'm going to Shmuel. Moshe chayiv b'Meiser. We just had that, and we learned in Vaschana and Ekev that Hashem showed, when Moshe is describing everything, and that Hashem punished him, and he couldn't come into Eretz Yisrael, but he took him to Har Nevo, and he stood there and he saw all of Eretz Yisrael. So whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Moshe, that's Chayiv and Meiser. That's the part of Eretz Yisrael that's Chayiv and Meiser. There were additional parts that Hashem showed Avram Avinu, that he promised him that eventually those areas will also belong to Avram Avinu's children, but those aren't part of Eretz Yisrael that Moshe was shown. So Kosher HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Chayiv and Meiser, because he says Zos Haaretz. Rashi brings down the pasuk Chayiv Meiser, right? Rashbam brings it down here. Where's the Rashbam? I'm trying to see the Rashbam. It says Zos, Zos Lemute, right? So Zos Haaretz Hashem Shpati. This is the land that I promised to Avram's children. Zos, says the Gemara now. Gemara says, Lapukema, what does it come to exclude? You're saying only the lands that Hashem showed Moshe, that's Chayiv and Meiser. That's Eretz Yisrael. What does it exclude? Lapuke Keni Knizi Kadmoni, to exclude those areas of those tribes, the Keni, the Knizi, and the Kadmoni, that even though they were promised eventually will be in Avram Avinu's children's descendants' possession, but those aren't part of Eretz Yisrael for Meiser. Now, what are those areas today? Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni. Well, not today in 5784, but in the time of the Gemara, what did it look like? How did they define it then? Time Rav Meir Omer, Naftucha, Arva, Bashalma. Arva is maybe Arabia, whatever they were, but those are the areas that are defined. That Rav Meir defined them in his time. That's those areas that they were in Rav Meir's time. Those areas called Naftucha and Arva and Salma. Those are the areas of the Keni, Knis, and Kamad. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Har Seir, Amon Moab. Amon Moab we know is where Jordan is today. Har Seir there. So those areas which will eventually be in our hands, but are not part of Eretz Yisrael for Trumas and Ma'aser. Rabbi Shimon Omer are Diska, Asya, Baspamia. Usually Asya and Aspamia is Asia, Spain maybe, maybe not. Maybe those are, that's how we define them. Says the Mishnah, going back to Chazak of 3 years. What happens? Somebody comes, Reuben says to Shimon, what are you doing on my land? Shimon says, I bought it from you 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And I've been here for 3 years. I've been occupying the land for 3 years, and I have proof to that effect. What's the proof? How do you prove that you were on the land, you occupied land 3 years? Adam. That's the best way to bring proof. I have Adam that I was there 3 years. Okay. Now, let's say Shimon brings the two Adam, with the first group of Adam, and they say, yes, we testify that Shimon has been occupying this land. He's planting and harvesting, occupying the land in the way you normally occupy land. If it's a house, if it's a field, treating the field, harvesting, etc. Now, the first set of Adam were found to be liars. Adam Zoman. Why? Because Ad number 1 and Ad number 2 said he's been there for 3 years. Ad number 3 and Ad number 4 came and said, you couldn't have testified to that. You were with us in St. Louis at the time. Therefore, you're liars. You couldn't be testifying this. You were with us. And they're testifying about the entire 3 years, not just, partial, because we saw them once there. Testifying for all 3 years. That's hard to bring proof. So they're found Zoman. What's the halach of Adam Zoman? If they wanted to kill, you kill them. If they wanted to give Malchus, you give Malchus to them. If they wanted to Mechayiv you Mamon, Kesef, you make them pay. So here, two Adam number 1 and number 2, who were found to be liars, not just liars, but Adam Zoman, they wanted to take away Reuben's field and give it to Shimon, right? Because they were liars. They said Shimon has been occupying the land for 3 years, of course, with a claim that he bought it, the shtar is not here anymore. but they were liars. They couldn't have testified to that. Therefore, they were trying to take away the field from Reuben and give it to Shimon. What is their punishment? They have to pay Reuben the value of the field. If the field was worth $1 million, they got to come up with $1 million now. That's the rule, right? That's Adam's omen. Okay. They have to pay Reuben the entire amount of money that right. Not only does Reuben get his field back, obviously, right? Shimon's occupation was invalid, didn't take place at all. Reuben gets his field back. In addition to that, he gets the entire value of the field again from these Adam's omen. Okay. Now we get into partials. Now let's understand something. When you're testifying about 3 years of occupation, you have to have Adam that I've been there for 3 years. Okay, let's say I got Adam number 1 and number 2 testify about the first year. Adam number 3 and number 4 testify about the second year. Adam number 5 and number 6 testify about the third year. Is that okay? Yeah, I have proof that I've been there all 3 years. They're giving the dates. One was there in 2001, one was there in 2002, one was there in 2003. Altogether, I have 3 years. That's good enough. I don't have to be the same Adam. In theory, I could have 900 or over 1,000 Adam each testifying to a different day. Maybe I had workers there, whatever, Adam who testified. So that's all good. So Shnaim Barishanim, Shnaim Shneim, Shnaim B'Shlishis, Mishalshin Beineim. What do you mean Mishalshin Beineim? Mishalshin Beineim is not only is that good witnesses, but if they are found to be Adam Zomerman, let's say now aid number 7 and number 8 come and say all six of yous, right? 1 through 6, you were all with us in St. Louis during that time. You couldn't have testified to any of this. Maybe, right? Maybe they all have to be Adam Zomerman to be proven Adam Zomerman. So they each have to pay a third now, meaning each set has to pay a third. Because if there was one set of Adam who lied, they have to pay, let's say, the whole $1 million, whatever the set was worth. If it was 3 sets comprising it together, they're considered one group. And if they're all found to be Adam Zomerman have to be entirely found. You can't find one Adam or one part of it. It has to be the whole group has to be one. So we say that and that means that they're all together. And therefore they have to split it. If they're found to be Adam Zomerman. Okay. In other words, they're considered all like one. Here Rashbam says, Kol kat titan ashlish the gimel kitas v'kaimlo and Adam Zomerman ashizim ukulam. So all 6 would have to split the amount of the money. That's what it comes out to be, right? They'd have to split it. They'd each have to pay a 6th effectively, right? If there's 6 Adam, they'd also pay a 6th each. Okay. Now, Shlosha Achim, Lechem Mitzdarif Imam. Let's say you had 3 brothers, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, testified about the 3 years. The Adam were Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. Reuben testified about the first year, Shimon about the second year, and Levi about the third year. And then there was one stranger, we'll call him a stranger, who was also witness. He testified about all 3 years. So the stranger testified with Reuben about the first year. The stranger testified about the second year with Shimon, and the stranger testified about the third year with Levi. Right? So again, Shlosha Achim, the Echem Mitzdarif Imam, Harel Shalosh Edyos. That's like 3. That's valid. Is there a problem because they're 3 brothers? They're not testifying about the same year. That one brother could testify about all 3 years, or 3 brothers testify 3 separate years. You can't have 2 brothers testifying about the same year because 2 brothers are considered Nogei Beidas. It's considered like one person. If you have 2 brothers testifying that somebody killed somebody, you can't have 2 witnesses. It's only considered like one aid. So, but here they're each testifying about a different year. For Azama, it's all one. In other words, it's considered again one group. He himself could testify. The brother who testified, Reuben could testify at all 3 years if he knew the testimony. So Shimon can testify at the second year, and Levi testified at the third. No, we don't pray. You don't say so kamo so you can testify at the second. And Esachas, the Mishalman, they don't pay until they're all muzam. So that means in this case, if you made them Adam Zomerman called them number 7 and number 8 have to testify that all 4 people, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and the stranger, all were Adam Zomerman, and then they'd have to split it. how much would each pay then? The stranger would pay half, right? Because he testified, he was half the testimony for all 3 years, and each of the brothers would pay 1/6, right? Okay. All right, that's so far. Now, so according to this, that's a good way to, that's okay. That's a good testimony. Masnis like Rabbi Akiva, says the Gemara. Our mission does not go like Rabbi Akiva. Why? The Tanya, Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said, Shalach Abba Chalafta, when my father Chalafta, we find many times in Shas, Rabbi Yossi is called Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. But Stam Rabbi Yossi, Rashbam says, something more says Rabbi Yossi, that's Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. That was his name. His father's name was Chalafta. So he says, when my father Chalafta went to learn about Rabbi Yochanan Nuri Torah, he went to Rabbi Yochanan to learn Torah. There's some say Marmalade was the opposite. Rabbi Yochanan Nuri ate Salaba Chalafta Torah. That Rabbi Yochanan went to my father, Rabbi Yossi's father, to learn Torah there. Amarlo. He said to him, Reisha Achla Shana Rishonim B'fnei Shnayim. Shia B'fnei Shnayim. Let's say the first year Shimon occupied the land in front of Edom number 1 and 2. And the second year he occupied the land in front of number 3 and number 4. And in the third year, he occupied in front of Edom number 5 and 6. What's the halacha? It's a chazaka. That's a chazaka, like we saw in our Mishnah. That's a chazaka. You have a chazaka. I was there 3 years. I have proof. I say I bought it from you 4 years ago. I don't have the star anymore, but I have proof that I was there for the 3 years. I have all these various witnesses can testify. Amalo afaniyam okain. So Rabbi Yochanan Nuri and Rabbi Chalafta agreed with one another that it's a chazaka. Ella Rabbi Akiva cholik. Rabbi Akiva doesn't agree. Why? The Davar said, why show Rabbi Akiva Omer? Davar v'lchatzah. But the pasuk says, Al pi shnayim edim yakum davar. One thing. He looks at the whole 3 years. Chazaka, what's my chazaka? That I've been there 3 years? Do you have 2 edim who could testify to the entire 3 years? If you don't, they're only testifying about a partial. That's like a partial. That's not a full witness. The edim have to testify about the whole thing. They have to say the whole thing. You can't say, just to give a far example, 2 edim come and say, we saw Yankel kill Shmerel. Did you see the whole thing? Well, I have, let's say 2 edim, we saw him take out the knife. And 2 other edim we saw the knife in Shmerel, That's like a half a testimony. You got to testify about the whole thing. Rabbi Akiva says this is also, the 3 years for Chazaka is 1 edus. And therefore, if you don't have 2 edim who testify about the whole 3 years, that's only a partial. That's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Abba Chalafta and our Mishnah holds no. You don't need that. The testimony is I have a chazaka. I can have a partial. The 2 things. This is not consecutive at the same time. When you see a murder, you got to see the whole murder take place. You got to see him take the knife and stick it into the guy. We'll give another example of the Gemara in a minute. We have to see it simultaneous. But a chazaka is a chazaka of 3 years. I just have to show that I was there 3 years. I have consecutive. The edim number 1 saw the entire 2021. The edim number 2 saw the entire 2022. The edim number 3, the third set saw the entire 2023. I have proof that I was there 3 consecutive years, the entire time, not missing even an hour. Right? That's good enough according to the other rabbis, not according to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says it's not a complete testimony. It says Rabbanan Haydavar Lachas Davar Ma'avlei. What are the Rabbanan? The pasuk does is Al Pishnai Meir Yakum Davar. The Rabbanan, these Rabbi Yochanan Nuri and Rabbi Yossi, Rav Chalafta rather, and our Mishnah who hold that it is. So what do they do with the Davar? The pasuk says Al Pishnai Meir Yakum Davar. You have to testify about the whole thing, not a partial. Elaim, if you tell me Lemute Echad Omer Al Gabav Echad Omer Achas Begabas Kreis. So here's the question. Normally, when a kid is bar mitzvah or a girl is bat mitzvah, it's assumed, we have a chazaka today, that if they've reached the years, 12 years or 13 years old, by a boy it's 13 years old, Lacham Moshe Misinai, a girl 12 years old, doesn't say it in the pasuk, Lacham Moshe Misinai, it's assumed under normal circumstances that they seem to be developing properly. You could assume that they have 2 pubic hairs. Some say, according to Mashmar, it doesn't need to be 2 pubic hairs, any hairs on their body, it's good enough. Okay. So that's a regular assumption. However, there are cases, or a woman could testify. Another woman could see her in the shower, whatever. Sometimes that's usually good enough. You don't need edim, right? 2 regular men. However, there are cases. Let's say you want to kill her. Let's say she committed adultery, and now it's a shaila. She was warned, and the adulterer, and then everybody was warned, and you want to kill her. You need more witnesses today. You need solid proof that she was bat mitzvah. Maybe she wasn't bat mitzvah. Bat mitzvah, she has to have years. She has to be 12, and she has to have attained puberty. Puberty means 2 hairs. So let's say it's like this. Let's say you have two Adam, or you have two Adam. One says, I saw now, and they have to see it simultaneously, right? They have to be at the same time. Let's say two Adam says, oh, we saw one hair on her body on Monday. And two other Adam say, or even if the same Adam come and say, we saw on Tuesday, we saw another hair on her body. Not good, because maybe that hair, the first hair fell off by then. It would only be like what we call a shuma, like a mole. It's not a real evidence of puberty. Puberty have to be to have 2 hairs at the same time. It's okay. So let's say, what does the davar velochatz davar exclude according to these rabbis? It doesn't exclude the 3 years of 2 Adam in the first year, 2 Adam in the second year, and 2 in the third year, or any amount of time. You know, when we say 2 in the first year, could that be 2 in the first year and a half, 2 in the second year and a half? It doesn't make any sense how you split it up, as long as we have the entire time. What does davar velochatz davar exclude? Maybe one aid says, I saw a hair on her back, and one on her abdomen. There's one aid says, I saw a hair on her back at the same time. And the other aid says, I saw an aid on her front, right? So is that what we're talking about? It's not, they don't have 2 aidim testifying about both. It says, hi, chatzi davar, is that chatzi davar, chatzi aidasu? You don't even have 2 aidim. The aid who said, I saw it on the front, didn't say he saw it on the back. And the aid who saw it on the back didn't say he saw it on the front. You don't even have 2 aidim on a chatzi davar. That's not even chatzi davar. It's not even chatzi aidus, because you need to say 2 aidim who saw the same thing. If one aid says Reuben killed whatever, Yankel killed Shmerel, and another aid says Beryl killed Shmerel, there's no that you don't have 2 aidim. You don't have 2 aidim on anything. You have only 1 aid. So here, if one aid says I saw a hair over there, and one aid says I saw another hair over there, you don't even have 2 aidim on 1 hair. You only have 1 aid on 1 hair. Oh, I got 2 aidim who say one I saw it on the back, and 2 aidim saw one on the front. Okay, that's a tip of chassid. You have 2 aidim, but you don't have the whole davar. You don't have 2 aidim on both hairs. You need 2 aidim who saw the murder. You need 2 aidim who saw the whole thing. In the case of the chazaka that we're talking about, yeah, you have 2 aidim on each year. That's fine. You don't have the years. Years can't be consecutive. Years by definition, time by definition is not simultaneous. You can't have the same. If you had 6 aidim on 2021, that doesn't help you. You need 3 years, and the years by definition, time goes on. Can't be the same time. But when it comes to testimony about puberty, you have to have 2 aidim at the same time who saw both things. So yes, if 2 aidim at the same time saw both hairs, that's good enough. But over here, if you only saw 2 aidim saw 1 hair and 2 aidim saw another hair, that's not 2 aidim on the whole davar, on the whole testimony. And here you need 2 aidim on the whole testimony. So that's what they come to. So what happens, back to our case of the field, what happens if 2 aidim say, yes, we saw him all 3 years he planted and harvested wheat. And the other aidim say, all 3 years we planted and harvested barley. What do you say there? Haray's a chazaka. Rav Yehuda says that's a chazaka. That's a chazaka. Maskil, Rav Nachman's Kash, I understand. What could you be talking about? Are you talking about really barley and wheat literally? Can't be that. You know why? Because they're contradicting one another. That's what we call Eidus Mukresh. It's not Eidim Zomin, right? If 2 people say Yankel killed Shmerel and 2 people say Beryl killed Shmerel, they're contradicting one another. They both fall aside. So if 2 people say we saw him 3 years of wheat and 3 years of barley, if you take them literally at their word, then there's no testimony here at all. You must not mean that. You must mean that 2 aidim saw him eat wheat in years 1, 3, and 5, and 2 aidim saw him do barley in years 2, 4, and 6, because they usually used to alternate the crops. That was for the health of the land. They would alternate. That must be what you meant, right? That must be what you meant. That 2 aidim, and you say over there that's a good chazaka. That must be what you meant, because if they meant literally, they just contradict one another. There's no aids there at all. So if that's the case, Rav Nachman says Ela Me'ata. I'm explaining the way Rashbam explains the kasha, the havmin of Rav Nachman. Ela Me'ata echad omer achol b'shana shlish. If let's say, what kind of thing is that? Even if forget about wheat and barley, even if they are all testifying about the same thing, wheat, but you have 2 witnesses who say, right? Rather, what? Ela Me'ata echad omer achol b'shana shlish. 1 aid says, right? Again, it's not 2 and 2 here. This is the cases where 1/8 says 1/8 says wheat, 1/8 says barley. If it's literal, then they're contradicting one another. It must mean one says I saw years 1, 3, and 5, and one says I saw years 2, 4, and 6. Would that be good? So the truth is, even if it's 2 Adam who said this, Rashbam says Echad Omer. Just looking at Rashbam, if he says it's one person or one set. Perhaps it's mashma, it's one person. One person says chit, one person says soren. He says that's good. That's good. He says, I understand. It can't be they're contradicting one another. It must be that it's like one said I saw years 1, 3, and 5 of wheat, and one says 2, 4, and 6 of barley. So he says, even if they were testifying about the same wheat, not wheat and barley. One says 1, 3, and 5. One says 2, 4, and 6. Is that a chazaka? That's not a chazaka. Chazaka has to be 3 consecutive years. Remember we said before, let's say you were there 1 year, and then you left, right? Then you left. So I didn't bother protesting because I didn't see you there for. I know I got 3 years. I know you have 3 years, so I didn't bother protesting. 1, 3, and 5, 2, 4, and 6 is not a chazaka. Those aren't consecutive. What are you comparing? There, in the year the one's testifying, let's say you have 2 Adam. Reuben's testifying about, I'm giving a bad example. Let's say Adam. Adam number 1 is testifying 1, 3, and 5. Adam number 2 is testifying 2, 4, and 6. On the year that number 1 is testifying, number 2 is not testifying there, right? The year that number 1 is testifying about, the second one's not testifying about that year. But over here, they're both testifying about the same year. Michael, man, what are you going to say? The reason he says that it's good is when 1/8 says, I saw him there for 3 consecutive years eating wheat or consuming wheat. And the other one says, I saw him 3 consecutive years consuming barley. The reason Rabbi Yehuda says it's good testimony is because people don't differentiate between wheat and barley, right? You ask the average yeshiva guy, said, that field over there, what's it growing? Is it wheat or barley? I don't know. It looks like it's growing something, right? That's what he means over here. They have to be testifying about the same year. If it's not consecutive years, it's no good at all. Says Rashbam a few lines from the bottom of the page. 6 lines from the bottom of the page. Rishuv ben Karcha had said, there's a different machlokas that Rashbam referred to before. The 2 witnesses in general, when they talk about, do they have to see it simultaneously? So general opinions, yes. They don't have to. Let's say 1/8 says, I saw him borrow $100 on Monday. And others, I saw him borrow $100 on Tuesday. That's good enough. They can't be talking about the same money. It was 2 different transactions. Yes, but they're testifying about the money. There was between the 2 of them, there's $100 there. Rishuv ben Karcha has that opinion. Even if Rishuv ben Karcha says, at least you know that they're talking about $100. There you could say, if 1/8 says, I saw him in years 1 to 3, I saw him consume the land 1 through 3. Another one said, I saw years 4, 5, and 6. Between the 2 Adam, they're each testifying about 3 consecutive years. That could be like a Rishuv ben Karcha's opinion, even though we don't necessarily hold like Rishuv ben Karcha. But over here, right? Neither one's testifying about a consecutive chazaka of 3 years. The chazaka b'dil again at klum, Rashbam says, a chazaka of non-consecutive years, jumping around, right? Non-consecutive years is not a chazaka at all. That's shot over here. Okay, so the answer is, why is Rabbi Yehuda's case okay? Because when one says, I saw these 3 years, years 2020 to 2022, let's say, 3 consecutive years, I saw him eat wheat. And others says the same 3 years, I saw the entire 3 years of barley. It's good testimony, it's a good chazaka, because most people can't differentiate between wheat and barley. Says another case, listen to this. 2 witnesses signed on a star, 1 and 2. Now what happens many times? They're signed on a star, an IOU or a bill of sale. And then many times you want to confirm the witnesses. Why? because you're afraid that the witnesses will die or will go overseas, and you want to bring it to court to testify. Now, if the two Eidim themselves who signed on the shtar, they come to court and say, this is my signature, that's good enough. You don't need two separate Eidim on each aid to say that's his signature. If you bring the document to court and each witness who signed on it says, yes, that's my signature, yes, that's good enough. However, in this case, these two guys signed on it, number one and two, Shachal Chadman, number one died. Number two comes along to court, he could testify, right? Number one died. Now we have to, how do we confirm, how does Bezdin confirm, validate the shtar? So they put their handpick on it and then it's considered confirmed. Well, number two could testify about his own handwriting. That's his document. On number one, you got to bring two other Eidim. Two Eidim who can testify that's his handwriting, that's his signature. So one of them died. Also, Achba died. Number two is there. Number two's brother came with another one, right? In other words, number two's brother didn't sign on it, but he's coming as a witness to testify about number one's signature, the deceased number one signature. He comes with a stranger, another aide, who testify together. Also, the brother of the one who's alive, meaning number two is testifying about his own signature, and number two's brother is testifying about number one's signature with another guy, and another stranger, testify about the guy who died. Let's say, okay, that's okay. Isn't that like our Mishnah? Our Mishnah said if you had three brothers who testified, one about year number one, one about year number two, one about year number three, and each one of the brothers testified with one stranger about that year, that's okay. That should be okay. So here too, it should be okay. No. There, what happened? The stranger testified with each of the three brothers about a particular year. So if they were muzam, right, the stranger would pay half, and the three brothers together would pay half, each for their year. But over here in this case, what do you have? When you're confirming this document, let's say this document says that Shimon owes Reuben $100. Okay, when they're confirming it, they're basically saying that signature number two, he's alive, he's testifying on, he's covering $50. Half of it is based on his. Then you have the other half, the number one signature, which covers, let's say, the other $50, is done by aid number two's brother together with a stranger. So it comes out that aid number two and his brother, who only count together as one, are taking out, are withdrawing 3/4 of the money. In other words, they're basically 3/4 of the money is done through one aid, him and his brother, and the other quarter by another one. That's no good. There it's all equal. Each brother did 1 year together with the stranger. So the stranger effectively, if they got muzam, they'd have to pay the whole $1 million. What would they have to pay? The stranger would have to pay half of the $1 million, and the other three brothers would split the other $500,000. That's all equal. But over here, 3/4 of the money is being confirmed or taken away or pulled out from Shimon to Reuben based on the testimony of one aid number two and his brother. His brother counts with him as one. There you don't have 3/4 being taken away or being transferred based on brothers. Here you have 3/4, meaning the River means the whole amount less a quarter of the money. And as Rashbam says in the wide lines before the Mishnah in the Rashbam, the time of the Pasuk Rachmana Krobim is the reason why the Torah, Hashem invalidated witnesses who are brothers. The reason is not because they're liars, but because the two brothers together are only considered like one. Because a person's like Karabet's last one, you can't testify about yourself. So a brother can't testify a brother either. So effectively, when two brothers are testifying about something, it's like only one person's testifying. So over here, when you have the brother number two is covering half the money, and brother aid number two is covering half the money, and his brother is covering 1/4 of the money because he's testifying with a stranger about number one, the guy who died, the deceased number one's signature. So it comes out 3/4 of the money is being transferred or being handled based on one witness, and that's no good. And that's why it's possible in this case. All right, we'll pick it up in the Mishnah tomorrow. Have a good day.